Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is going to be called The Grace... Shall we start again? Sorry, I'm going to start again. Right. Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is going to be called The 10 Greatest Albums of All Time, with a question mark at the end of it. Alright? So I've just filmed a video where I've looked at my 10 Desert Island discs, which are basically my 10 favourite albums, the albums that I would pick above all the other albums. And I thought a companion piece to this would be to come up with an objective list of the 10 greatest albums of all time. And I started to jot some ideas down, and I thought I'll do a bit of research. So I googled 10 greatest albums of all time, and I came against the Rolling Stone greatest 5 albums of all time. So I looked at the top 10, and I looked at them and I was like, nah. And I didn't really agree with any of it, you know, so I thought that's a bit of a load of rubbish. I wonder if there's another one. So I googled another, and I came up with The Enemy. The Enemy is like an alternative, well, it was an alternative sort of rock music British magazine, which favoured much more indie bands. And I read their top 10, and it was even worse. And straight away, what's happening is I'm hitting against the critics' view of music, which is the story of music. This story's out there, and it's pushing certain artists to the fore and pushing certain artists down. I know that this channel is we are championing some of the best music that's ever been recorded, but of course it's all outlier stuff. It's all left field. You know, that's what the critics, they don't want to admit. Right? They'll grudgingly admit Miles Davis is a great artist because he's a jazz artist, but they don't want to grudgingly admit Return to Forever are. Even though they share the same musicians, the same history and all that, you come up against a story, a narrative that's been created by a privileged, educated elite that are really interested in pushing their own agenda on you. And that's been going on since the beginning of recorded music. It's all over the place. So I thought what I'm going to do is I'm going to address this idea, and I'm going to talk my way through the Rolling Stone top 10 list and then go through the NME top 10 list. So you're going to get 2 lists of the 10 greatest here. For those of you who really want to have that list and be told what the 10 greatest albums are, we're going to go through 2 lists. And I'm going to discuss them, and then I'm going to try and come up with some conclusions. I got no conclusions now. You know how I work. I haven't planned this. I haven't researched this. So these albums as well, I haven't gone away and read up on these artists. So what you're getting is what I know of these artists. So Rolling Stone at number 10, they have The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill at number 10. So that's supposedly the 10th greatest album of all time. Greater than A Love Supreme. Greater than In a Silent Way. Right, because those are on the list. Okay, greater than One Size Fits All by Frank Zappa. This is what we've got to ask ourselves: is that album greater than those albums? For me, of course not. The Rolling Stone is really, I feel now, very conservative, middle of the road view of what music history is, and they have to make a nod to hip hop, right? And this is a grudging nod to hip hop, right? Is Miseducation of Lauryn Hill greater than any of the Public Enemy albums, or NWA, or Tribe Called Quest? Right? No, of course it's not. Why have they picked this album? Because it's a soft, basically R&B album, and it's a great album, right? Is it better than an album created by Erykah Badu at around the same time, or Michelle Ndekachelo? No, even in the genre it's in and the time scale, even if we early 90s and we, you know, it's not greater than those albums, but it sold more. This album sold a lot, it was successful, and when you go through the Rolling Stone list, that is a criteria that is really important to them. I've spoken on this channel before about the criteria people use to assess greatness, and it'll be skill level, cultural impact, popularity, innovation, and then whoever's making the list, personal taste. Those are the things, and they all vie. And I've argued that if you have something that scores across all of those, you really are dealing with something that we can objectively call greatness. It's not truly objective, but it's a closer assessment than just what we've got here. which is Rolling Stone choosing a lot of very middle of the road white American music and going, oh my God, we better pick something from sort of the hip hop world. And they go for Miseducation, Lauryn Hill, because it sold a ton of records. Lauryn Hill was Flavour of the Month. You know, she came out in the Fugees, she had a great big hit record, then she got off the solo deal, they all did, she went and made this album, it was a huge success. And then she sort of disappeared from view, you know. Why you would rate that album, and I know the album, I heard it when it came out. It is a great album. Of course, all of these albums are great, right? But is it the 10th greatest album ever made? Right. Number 9, Blood on the Tracks, Bob Dylan. Right? I can't stand Bob Dylan. Right? Who's the most important artist in the last 60 years in terms of the development of rock and pop music? It's Bob Dylan. Right? Without a doubt. What he did in the 60s changed music. And what he did was, firstly, he stopped rock and pop musicians singing about driving around in cars and chatting each other up. Right? He elevated the subject matter. He democratized the voice. I believe Louis Armstrong had done this before, and a whole bunch of obscure blues and jazz artists had done this already. But Bob Dylan sang in a way where the lyrics are more important, and that meant that pop music could allow a whole wider range of voices through. That's very important. He electrified folk music, which really creates rock music. And a testament to how ahead of his time he is that this list is by a magazine called Rolling Stone. And that is named after a track, Like a Rolling Stone, by Bob Dylan, that was made in 1965. And if you put that track on, even if you don't like Bob Dylan like me, because you're a jazz head, right, and you don't quite get it, right, but even I can hear that that's an astonishing track for 1965. It sounds like 1975. It's incredible, right? So why pick an album from 1975, Blood on the Tracks, where Dylan was as far as I know, was not the influence that he was in the 1960s. And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe that album sold a ton. Maybe it's sort of that 70s middle of the road sound that Dylan had channeled. I don't know. So that's what we got at number 9. Number 8, they've got Purple Rain by Prince and the Revolution. Right. I have that album in my collection because I'm a big Prince fan. Is it Prince's greatest album? No. Sign of the Times is his greatest album. Parade is better than Purple Rain. Love Sexy is better than Purple Rain. There's a whole ton of albums by Prince that are better than Purple Rain. But Purple Rain is the soundtrack to a massive hit film. So this again, it's like you feel like they go, well, we've got to have some 80s artists. We need some sort of pop 80s artist. Why not pick Michael Jackson? If you're just interested in sales, pick Thriller, because Thriller's an incredible album. It's really incredible. It's a better album than Purple Rain. It just is. Anyone with ears can tell it. It's an incredible album. But they don't know that. They don't know anything about music. So they go, we've got to have Prince, right? We're not going to have Madonna. We're not going to have Michael Jackson. We've got to pick one of them. Let's pick Prince. You can see that's the thinking. And that comes in at number 8. Even though we all know it's not Prince's best album. It is a great album. It's got some great hit records on. You know, but anyone that argues that Let's Go Crazy is on the same level as the single Sign of the Times, which is just a sublime track, you know. So, in my opinion, it's not even Prince's greatest album. If you're picking it for those reasons of trying to represent 80s pop music, there's other albums I would go for. Number 7, Fleetwood Mac Rumours. I like Rumours and I like Fleetwood Mac. I like Mick Fleetwood's drumming. I like the vocal harmonies. I really like it. They've said this is the 7th greatest album ever made. It's better than Led Zepp 4. Right? It's better than ELO. Why pick that album? It's totally down to sales because it sold billions and billions and billions. It's a great album. Right, number 6. Nevermind by Nirvana. Right. I see that whole grunge thing as being part of a scene. I feel that Jeremy by Pearl Jam or Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden or Them Bones by Alice in Chains are as great as anything Nirvana made. So we have to ask ourselves why the critics and why history points to Nirvana, and it's the story, isn't it? It's what they represented culturally. And I think it's what Kurt Cobain represented. He represented drums in the way he dressed and the way he acted. It's Nevermind is a really, really important album. It's probably the most important album since 1990. So that's the last 30 years, really. It changed the music scene. It changed rock completely. It can change fashion. It changed films. But at the same time, while that was going on, you had dance music and electronic music and hip hop there was a revolution going on there, and it was almost like Nevermind and the grunge artists were the last hooray of rock music. We had Rage Against the Machine. It should be on the list. I agree it should be on the top 10. Why have they picked it? I think they've picked it because it's an obvious choice. So I wouldn't argue with that, to be honest. Number 5, The Beatles, Abbey Road. Why not Sgt. Pepper? Why not Revolver? Why not the White Album? Why Abbey Road? Right? It doesn't seem to even be the Beatles' greatest album, although some people have a lot of affection for it, and so it's arguable. We're subjective here, but for me, I think in terms of innovation, Abbey Road is not innovative in the way that Revolver is innovative. And this just betrays what's on this list. They're not interested in innovation. They're interested in the high point. They're always interested in the high points, this list. Number 4, Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life. All right? That's an incredible album. It's not my favourite Stevie Wonder album. That will be Innovision's. But in terms of the creative arc of Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life is the creative peak. It's like almost like a prog soul album, it's like was it like a triple album, was it a double album with another disc that you could get, and he does all sorts of stuff on there, and he does jazz fusion, so that's that's right, there's a fusion track instrumental on there which I wish I could remember, and someone's going to put it in the comments below. So that's really good. At number 4, at least we've got a bit of fusion coming in at number 4. So should we just pass over this one and move on to number 3? Joni Mitchell, Blue. I absolutely love Joni Mitchell. I want to talk about her on this channel. Joni Mitchell goes from a sort of coffee house folk artist through slowly to a jazz fusion musician. But they're not going to pick Mingus or Hajira on here. They're going to go for Blue. But I'm in agreement with them. I actually really love Joni Mitchell, and surprisingly I love the folk stuff more than the fusion stuff, and I'd like to have a video where we talk about that. And I think Blue is a peak, and I think it's one of the greatest albums, so I'm not going to argue with that. Number 2, we've got Pet Sounds. Pet Sounds is such an important album in the history of music. It was the Beach Boys' answer to the Beatles. It was the answer to albums like Revolver, right, which they haven't put on the list. Right? They don't know why Pet Sounds is important. They just know it is. And so they stick it on the list. I don't feel them putting it at number 2. They are saying this is the second greatest album ever made. Why? And that's exactly the same question I would ask of the number 1 they've got, which is Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. Why? Why choose that? Why not choose a P-Funk album, a Funkadelic album? That's a black political album. Why not Curtis Mayfield? Why Marvin Gaye? Because it sold more? Right? So we've got this rough idea of what they think is great, mixing with what they think is important in terms of sale. So you go to the NME's list, hoping that they're going to be a little bit more critical. But I got to be honest, this list is even more absurd and just shows, especially in the UK, what we have for music critics, right? So before we start on this list, I'll tell you what I think we have. We have sort of university educated, literate, young, privileged people trying to make a name for themselves by championing bands that make them look good and make them look the intellectual ones. And this has happened in history all the way through popular music. It actually goes back to people like Alan Lomax, going out to find original black blues and jazz talents, or John Hammond. You know, we've had that. It's even Dylan going to find Woody Guthrie. This has happened all the way along. A middle class privileged elite looking for authenticity. Right, I'm going to do a video on authenticity. I don't believe in it. Not in rock and pop music. I just don't believe in it. But that are probably these educated fools want to make the guilt they have for being privileged will be assuaged by their pursuit of authenticity. Right? This really is apparent in the latest craze for Americana, and it's the thing that undid punk. Right? So what have we got on this list from the NME, which I believe is just full of those sort of music critics? Number 10, we have Oasis, definitely, maybe. It's the 10th greatest album ever made. Okay? Oasis basically sold a lot of records, and they sold a lot of records because they took a certain approach that had happened with other bands. They just lifted it off bands like The La's, Chapter House, Stone Roses, and the Beatles, and they're so derivative, but they were able to sell it to an audience that didn't normally listen to rock music, right? Now, I give him kudos for that, right? I also think that Liam's got a fantastic voice, which is really iconic, and they wrote some great songs, albeit very derivative songs. Their moment lasts for a couple of years, right? And they, with good business sense, have been able to milk that success they had, that a band that had sort of equal success at the same time, like Manson, couldn't. Right, so good band, some good songs. We can sort of, I've tried to critique them the best I can. I know a little bit about them because I played for an Oasis tribute band for a while. I had to learn all this stuff. 10th greatest album of all time? I don't think so. You know, but that's the ear that betrays their indie ear. Let us start with that. Number 9, Beatles, The White Album. Okay, well, that album, I would put that above Abbey Road in terms of innovation. So this shows that they are more interested in innovation perhaps than the Rolling Stones list. Number 8, Pixies, Doolittle. Right, this is that educated elite not putting Nevermind on, but going, oh well, you know, Nirvana, they took a lot from the Pixies, didn't they? And so we'll let everybody know that this band, you know, that we know about this band, you know, and they've put that on the list just to show them that. Number 7, we have Stone Roses, the self-titled debut album. The Stone Roses is exactly my era. They played Wolverhampton when I was at college there, and one of the girls that I was at art college with, she actually went off with she was a painter, and she was painting all this sort of Manchester type art, and she actually hooked up with them. They also poured paint over a guy called Paul Birch because he'd released some records, because he owned a label called FM Revolver, and they went over there and poured paint over. I was a part of all that. I was around all that. I was aware of the Stone Roses. I thought they were pretty cool. I give them credit for actually bringing back sort of a funky vibe back into music in the 80s, because the funk really left, especially rock music, and you know, Fool's Gold was a funky track. I like Stone Roses. I think they're great, you know. They're still being elevated because they every artist on this is coming from that, except for the Beatles. It's all pretty much indie derived music on this list. So let's just get through it. Apparently better, one better than Stone Roses is Pulp, A Different Class. Okay? It's all about class. This is what it is. This music's all about class. It's all about championing your working class roots, trying to prove you're authentic and real. None of these people are. Okay? Again, I like that album. Whether it's the 6th greatest album ever made, I don't know. Number 5, Velvet Underground and Nico, the Banana album, the Andy Warhol album. Of course they're going to put that album on. Right? That is the educated art, humanities person's idea of the perfect band. You know, put together by Andy Warhol, singing songs about drugs and S&M and all that type of thing. It's an important album. It's there's something I feel manufactured after the event when people champion this stuff. You know, I think that album sold tens of thousands at the time. Its influence was there, especially on my era in the 80s. It was almost like the middle class educated elite in the 60s going back to the blues artists. You know, in the 80s, a lot of bands that I was around at that time were going back to the Velvet Underground. I always saw through it, you know, I actually think that Lou Reed was a very good songwriter, and his background, he had originally been a sort of Tin Pan Alley songwriter, and I think that's their saving grace, is that he wrote great songs. Walk on the Wild Side, Perfect Day, they're actually very, very good songs. So I can say this stuff's great, but it putting these on the list, there's no way that this is even less representative to me than the Rolling Stone one. At number 4, better than Velvet Underground, we have The Strokes, Is This It? It's just a privileged elite liking a privileged elite. That's what that is. The Strokes, okay band, and they put them number 4 on the list. I don't know what to say about that. Number 3, Hunky Dory by David Bowie. All right, great album, some incredible songs on there. For me, Bowie reaches his peak when he hauls up in Berlin with Brian Eno and gets Robert Fripp on guitar. All right, why not that? Why Hunky Dory? It's because it's more poppy, I suppose. It's more. They don't know about music. That's what this is what both these lists tell you. Number 2, Beatles Revolver. Fair enough. I think if I was putting a list together, I think I'd have Beatles Revolver on there. That's a really important album, and a way more important album than the album they've got number 1, The Smiths, The Queen Is Dead. I really like The Smiths. Incredible songwriter. This list's a bit old because I think I've forgotten his name. Lead singer of The Smiths. This is what happens when you get old, you see, is that you can be talking about something and you can just absolutely go blank on something so obvious. So I'm stalling here. Morrissey. I didn't even have to look it up. This happens when you get old. I tell you, it's terrible. You know, sat there trying to think of your kids' names. You know, Anyway, Morrissey's love of the English aesthetic, something I've spoken about a lot on this channel, has perhaps gone a bit too far in their eyes, and they now think he's a borderline Nazi racist. You know, so would he get on the list now? I don't know whether they would put the Smiths. They'd have to apologise for putting it there, and they'd have to check it, because that's what this is all about. These lists are about virtue signalling, right? A lot of these people, I don't think really have an interest in music. There's nothing there that belies a real interest in music. You know, where are the jazz albums? Where are the prog albums? Why is that music not on here in any shape or form? Except, as I pointed out, sneakily snuck in by good old Stevie Wonder, who's a proper musician who knows what he's doing. Anyway, that's my take on these 2 lists. Like it or lump it, that's what I think. And I'm going to finish there, and I'm going to move on to the next video. So I hope you liked it, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.